What's up guys? Kawakaze meta tier 15 is here today, and despite her HP pool looking a little chunky at 1.6 million, I would say she's one of the easier bosses to one-shot in recent times as a result of the recent power creep in terms of both ships and equipment, specifically battleship HE guns. However, while Lion and Trafalgar are definitely two of the best ships for this fight, many older ships that haven't really been in the spotlight as of late are viable as well, as this is, I believe, the first destroyer meta boss we've ever had, and there's no destroyer arbiter in Operation Siren. In this video, I'm just going to be showcasing 6 fleets that I put together that ended up being able to one-shot. They're neither optimal, as in the 6 best possible ships for this fight, nor optimized in terms of their equipment loadout, but I hope that this can serve as a bit of inspiration for you to experiment and maybe try out some other ships you otherwise wouldn't have. Alright, I'll be doing the showcase in the chronological order that I sorted them. The first fleet here is just the basic 3 battleships fleet with the Alsace and Lion 1-2 punch. I'm using Vanguard in the last slot, but it definitely works with Soyuz, Bismarck, and to be honest, even some of the permanently available options like New Jersey or UVH. Kawakaze deals a ton of damage, so Eldridge is pretty much mandatory in the Vanguard to keep it alive. Well, you could probably make a fleet that works without her, but from what I've tried so far, I'd rather use a fleet without Lion than Eldridge for this fight. Her slow also pretty much guarantees that battleships are able to land most of their damage. As I've always said, the moment the Vanguard pressure is actually high, you're going to be reaching for Eldridge without a second thought, which is why I rate her so highly on my tier list. Then, Trafalgar is just always going to be nice with her evasion debuff, and Kawakaze has enough evasion to warrant bringing it. Although, against light armor specifically, there are other options that could actually be better depending on your needs. By the way, you can rewind and pause to check my equipment, but they're not yet fully optimized, so if you find a couple of things that can be improved, chances are they can be, so give it a try. Now, the reason I put Alsace in flagship here is because if she's using the same gun as Lion, Lion will fire first and not make full use of Alsace's damage buff, so I put the Lion gun on Alsace instead, and putting her as the flagship also triggers Eldridge's slow and Trafalgar's debuff for herself as well as Lion. I'm using Fu Shun, who I believe should be at least top 3, if not the highest pure damage dealers for this fight. Although Plymouth might still be better here, but some variety is nice just so you can get a broader idea of what works. The other big damage dealers are Hindenburg and St. Louis from PR1 with her unique augment, but also Fu Shun's sister Taiyuan, of course. For the next fleet, I'm using a USS Core with Kearsarge and Yorktown 2. Yes, it's still good. I'm using Alsace here just to show that you don't need Lion, but Lion would be better. Also, I do believe that Aurora is a bigger total damage increase than Trafalgar, if you can keep her alive that is, as when I tried using Aurora without carriers, she wasn't staying alive consistently without the screen clear from the airstrikes. But also, I think putting Eldridge in the middle and Aurora in the back could also help with keeping her alive. And by the way, if you see 75 ladder points as the reward, those are going to be the support runs where I could only run one time. And for those fleets, I was pretty confident after trying them out a couple times in my own host that they would have a good chance of one-shotting a backup request. Also, the game bugged out for some reason, so I got 3 hosts somehow instead of 2, which is why I ended up getting 6 end screens. All my life, I did not cheat. The next fleet is pretty much the same idea as the USS fleet, but with Bismarck and Rumey instead. This is one of those rare occasions where Z-52 isn't de facto the best option, just because other ships are relatively stronger against light armor than she is, but replacing Plymouth with Z-52 here would have worked perfectly fine as well, I think. The next fleet features Soyuz and Chapayev. Chapayev is one of those ships that I always thought would be pretty good against the destroyer boss, but we never got one until now. She not only reduces the boss's evasion rate by 10%, which is the same strength as Trafalgar but permanent, but she also deals a respectable amount of damage herself and also buffs the other vanguards on top of that, so definitely a dark horse viable option to look out for. Perhaps even better than Trafalgar if you don't need a tank, because she definitely can't do that even with the help of Eldridge. Then I used Mogador as tank, because I put the line gun on Soyuz so that she would fire first and apply her iceberg debuff, and then Alsace and Lion would be left with the same gun, meaning Alsace would fire after Lion, which is why I settled on using Mogador to make Alsace's damage buff permanent, so the firing order doesn't really matter. The next fleet is a French corps. St. Louis is another one of those sleeper options I was talking about, but unlike Chapayev, who is more of a destroyer specialist, St. Louis would be good against any light armor enemy, similar to the DDGs. I've never really had a good opportunity to use her until now, but looking at how this panned out, if after a few more runs it turns out St. Louis is on that level of Hindenburg and Taijuan against light armor enemies, it might warrant an up tier from the B tier that I currently have her placed in. Okay, for the last fleet, I wanted to give Daisen a try because, believe it or not, she's only really good in a fight like this, despite the impression her kit gives at first glance. Anyway, even though her personal damage actually turned out to be fine, this was a lot harder than I expected because I had to use the Lion Gun on Daisen to let her get off 4 salvos, which led to Alsace and Lion both using 406 Mark 7s, which, as I mentioned already, means Lion fires before Alsace. So once again I had to use a French Vanguard, which couldn't be Mogador because I had to use Aurora to get enough damage, and Mogador as a tank would drag the Vanguard into the boss, and Aurora would die early, so I ultimately had to go with St. Louis, who couldn't really tank consistently. Maybe if Daisen, who was probably designed as a battleship that heals, actually did heal as opposed to pretty much never healing, it would have worked a little bit better. But yeah, if a random ship like Daisen works, then probably all the UR battleships should work just fine. Also, I feel like Duke of York would have been quite a lot easier than Daisen to make work, but at the same time you need a faster gun for Duke of York, because her reload is, well, about right for the standards of her time, but it's like 40 points under where it needs to be, and there's no HE equivalent of a 457, so the next best faster HE gun is quite a downgrade in terms of damage. Anyways, these are just 6 fleets I tossed together, and you can mix and match and tinker with equipments and whatnot. I will keep experimenting in the upcoming days, and there's also the Warspite augment coming out tomorrow, which might shake things up if it at least doubles her damage output. If it brings her up to actual UR level, it might be possible to almost pull off an HMS only fleet, but not actually because there's no equivalent of Eldritch in HMS to keep your Vanguard alive. Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.
戦場は行為、勝者が王になる。勝利とは断りを語っているのだ。